Welcome back to the next episode of the Tree Surgeons podcast. Today, I have got the wonderful Matt Harmsworth from the Rover Group. Now, Matt has had lots of experience in the tree surgery industry and now runs a very unique consultancy business that we're going to talk about today. But welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Thank you very much, Henry. It's great to be here. Great to finally push go on this one.
Yeah, let's go. So tell me, Matt, what was your experience? How did you get into the ARB industry and what's your experience with, I believe you ran an ARB business before. So just tell me a bit about that, Matt.
Yeah, I did, Henry. So basically, I trained as a countryside ranger at Merriswood College down in Surrey. And as you're probably aware, I think there's only two, or there was back then in the late 90s, there was only 2 or 3 basically courses doing countryside recreation and tree surgery type stuff in the UK. So I went to Merriswood. I did a 3-year sandwich placement for countryside recreation. Part of that was chainsaw use, playing around with cool machinery and all that kind of good stuff. And I got a job working for Surrey County Council on their countryside, sort of worked my way up through there. But it was crap in terms of money. I'm assuming swearing's all right, given the audience.
Absolutely fine. All good.
Good. Glad to hear
There's
it.
no limits. There's no limits here.
I have to keep explaining to my team that I'm just a crude tree surgeon by trade, and they're just going to have to put up with it.
Exactly that.
Yeah, so I went to work for Surrey County Council on their countryside teams. Lots of ground-based stuff, not a lot of climbing. So then I went to Merriswood, did the 10-week tree surgery course, which was a sort of bolt-on, essentially, back in the days of 3-strand and spinning around and Prusik loops and all that kind of good stuff. And then I got fed up with the council, basically. I was on like £9,000 a year, something like that. So it's probably, £14,000 a year in today's money. It was pretty dire. But I did get a house with the job. So that was a really big tie. And
Sure.
myself, and I had a business partner at the time, we basically identified that there was the possibility of doing countryside management, countryside recreation, land management, for all sorts of different organisations in the Surrey area. So if you remember back in the days of like homegrown timber and practicality brown and all that sort of stuff. So we got involved with that, large scale heathland clearance and all that kind of stuff. It was really, really good. And it allowed me to buy all sorts of cool bits of kit, which was awesome. We started off burning stuff in huge piles, and then wood chippers came along and changed the world. And when that work started to die off, we basically diversified into commercial and residential tree surgery, and it kind of went on from there. I ran that company up until I think probably it was about 2007, 2008, and then I moved away into consultancy. So yeah, lots of time in the trees in the early days.
And what did you find the most challenging thing about running a tree surgery business?
Where do you start? I'm not sure whether it's specific to tree surgery or whether it's a wider business problem. I found out a statistic off the back of the budget yesterday. Found out a statistic that something like 80% of businesses in the UK are actually below the VAT threshold, meaning less than 100 grand a year, owner operated 1 to 2 people businesses.
Yeah.
We were obviously much bigger than that. But one of the problems with a business of that size is that the owner only has to do the job, but they also obviously have to find the work, they have to do the quoting, they have to do the bookkeeping, they have to look after the equipment, they have to find and manage staff. And I think probably that side of things was the biggest challenge. I enjoyed more than anything else swinging around up trees, particularly on a sunny day. We were probably about 80% residential, 20% commercial at that stage. And the beauty of that type of work was that we ended up working on beautiful trees in very affluent areas in Surrey and Berkshire and the home counties. But I think it was the admin side of things, and then managing staff. When equipment blows up, what you do, you give up time with the family at the weekend to try and fix it, don't you? So that was probably the most challenging for me.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And actually, I heard a stat the other day that if you've got a 7-figure business, that you're in the top 7% of businesses, then you're in a very small area of the business world. And really, like what you just said there, is the biggest challenge, I think, in the industry is those one-man bands who want to stay under the VAT threshold, because that they're actually pricing themselves lower so they don't go over the VAT threshold, so they don't have to charge VAT, because they're fearful of not winning enough work, fearful of then having to pay VAT and all the different things that come with that. And then we're constantly trying to price against these people, which is actually just bringing the baseline of what people can charge down. So yeah, it's a really valid point that it is a constant struggle. And I think I see it now. I've been part of the mastermind and run the tree surgery mastermind. I've seen so many business owners who are working all the hours in the day and paying themselves like 35, 40 grand a year. And you think, well, for that
If
much
at
sort of
all.
money, if at all, exactly. And I've known people with less. And I think, they're working 12, 14-hour days, and you say, doing all the admin. And like, let's face it, we didn't get into tree work. Like most of us didn't get into tree work because we're academic. Most of us got into tree work because we want to swing around a tree and have fun. Like you said, on a sunny day, that's the buzz, that's the adrenaline, that's the fun bit. We don't want to be doing all the other stuff. So yeah, really valid point there.
And you have to wonder, is it a good thing to be doing, running the business, all the stress that involves, and then swinging around up a tree when you've been arguing with the missus the night before because you're never there. You're desperately trying to find, the cash to pay equipment, lease hire purchases, etc., and then you're swinging around up a tree with a chainsaw. I mean, I know of several people that had quite bad accidents off the back of the fact that they were just absolutely, completely shattered. And I don't know what the state of that market is now, but a lot of people that are attracted to trees do tend to be, dare I say it, adrenaline junkies. You love being outside. There might be guys, ex-forces, they might have a part-time job in the fire service, whatever it is. That was my experience back then anyway. And it's the camaraderie. You like doing something that's a little bit dangerous and a little bit out there, and you try and make it as safe as you possibly can do. But when you bolt in all those other stressors as well, it can become a very lonely, very stressful place to be. So
yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's where part of my drug addiction came from, was like working all the hours in a day. And then when I did have some time, I'd just go out on a bender because I didn't know how else to relax. And I'd have a fallout. Literally, you just said what I used to do, have a fallout with the missus, end up in a booze on a Friday night and be picking up the pieces at 7 a.m, thinking, fuck, I'm back here again. And that happened so many times. But it was like that kind of stress relief, because like you go down the pub and you'd sort of want to just vent to your mates, and they don't really care about your business. They just want someone to come and go and have fun with. And everyone's got their own challenges, and it is a lonely place running a business, especially when you're doing everything on your own and you've got life coming at you pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, 100%. And like you say, you go out with mates who might not necessarily, they're not other tree surgeons quite often. So you sort of get pulled down to that level, don't you? And they don't really understand what it's like running your own business. And therefore, because you're in that environment, you're having taking some drugs, whatever it might be, you almost end up feeling like, well, I should be able to have what they have. All this money is going through my business and I don't get to have the fun. So yeah, it was a good time, but it was a very stressful time as well.
Yeah, I agree. So just a question before we move into what you're doing now. If you were to start an art business again from day one, knowing what you know now with all your experience running different businesses, what would you do differently from word go?
I would, first off, I would try and niche on a particular part of the market. That's what I would start with. And I would also test the market as well without getting too techie and direct response marketing and all that sort of stuff. But there are tools and things out there now where you can test a business model to see whether it's going to work. I would do some research into the cost per acquisition of leads. How much running around all over the place, how many days per week do I need to be quoting to generate X amount of business? I would just do the bloody numbers. I didn't understand the numbers then. I couldn't tell you, absolutely hand on my heart now, I could not what we turned over. I couldn't tell you what the profit margins were. I know how much the finance payments were for 2 Unimogs and a tractor, but I couldn't tell you how much we were turning over. No idea at all. So yeah, I would invest the time and the money to see whether it was a viable business to start before I ruined something that I enjoyed working for somebody else. Because you can ruin a perfectly good job by trying to turn your job into a business sometimes, I think. So
Yeah. Well, I remember working for Chris Orr, and I remember specifically thinking, I always wanted to start my own business, but I remember thinking, I can't wait to become a boss because life's gonna be so much easier. And I'm sure a lot of other people in this industry think the same and think that the boss has got it easy. And then you actually you run a business, and then you go, oh fuck, yeah, like it's really hard. Like it's as the bigger the company gets, like Rob Moore always says, your reward for solving one problem is a bigger problem and the next problem. And the bigger the business gets, the more challenges, the more problems become along, and the more you've got to develop yourself, the more you've got to level up. And I think think sometimes I look back and think, knowing what I know now, would I have ever started a business or not? Because I think if you knew, like, cards face up, the stress, the amount of work that you've got to put in, the sleepless nights, the working through the weekends, the fallouts with family and friends, and that constant drive, like, would you do that? I think I enjoy what I do now, and I love running businesses, but like going through the whole mill of it all, like if I knew, and I think that's where ignorance is bliss sometimes. You go, right, we're going to go and start a business, but you're right, like going and researching and looking at what parts of the market work. Like Surrey is, I know from going to Merris Wood and hearing this stat, that Surrey is the most wooded in the UK. So like doing that kind of research and going, right, well, Surrey's a great place to start an art business, but also then going, well, actually, is Surrey completely, like when I talk on the mastermind between Scotland, and I know you're in Scotland now, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I've got Scottish guys on the mastermind who they have not got loads of competition around them. We go down to Southampton and there's a tree surgeon everywhere. There's like a tree surgeon on every street. Like even I get home today and I've got one I can hear over there, and one I can hear over there, and I've got one I can hear over there. And there's just so many tree surgeons. So it's also knowing niche, how many tree surgeons are operating, what sort of work there is, like what sort of market, all those things. So yeah, really valid points, Matt.
Yeah, and I think that is, God, that's not sexy, is it? Going Honey Brothers and choosing your chainsaws and the latest climbing harness, etc. That's the sexy shit. But at the end of the day, there's no point starting a business if you can't get a reasonable margin out of it. I mean, I know a few people recently who've tried to sell their business to various different investors and be acquired by other companies and things. And they walk in and they say, hang on a minute, you're making 100 grand a year profit. That's wonderful on your whatever, 700,000 a year turnover. But where's your salary? Oh, well, that's in that 100 grand. Okay, well, looking at your lifestyle, you're actually only making 25 grand profit then, aren't you? So that can have a huge effect on the value of the business. James Sinclair does some quite interesting breakdowns of the different stages of business that you go through. And I'm really lucky with where we're at now. I'm just at the point where I'm starting to put a senior management team in place. And that means I get out of ops and I can concentrate on all the really cool, sexy things that I like doing, like playing with AI and building sales funnels and things. So yeah,
and you've hit the nail on the head there. Like again, like there is so much shiny stuff, and I think I've been subject to this in the past by having fast tracks and tractors and crane fed chippers and mulchers and all this kind of stuff, and also always looking for the shiny thing, whether it be the shiny cool thing, but actually like business is, and it's actually doing the basics really, really well, whatever business you're in. And that's not sexy, it's not shiny, it's not actually that fun sometimes, but you've got to get through that to get the systems in place, get the management in place, be able to work with a team, build a team, and then you can then concentrate on some of the shiny stuff. And you say the AI. So tell me, Matt, about Rover and how you started that and what the decision making was and what you do, because I know that what things you do are amazing, and I'm not going to be able to articulate it like you.
Well, I struggle to articulate it really, to be honest. And this actually ties in beautifully with the tree surgery world. I'm 48 now, and I think as a middle-aged man, what I tend to be is attracted to shiny things, and I'll jump from one thing to another all the time. And it's something I have to constantly battle against. And when I got rid of my tree surgery company, I moved into arboricultural consultancy, and I sat beneath a guy called Scott Fairley in North Wales, which some of your listeners might know him. And he basically mentored me. I've always found that the best arboricultural consultants come from tree surgeons, because you just look at something and you understand it straight away. You understand the physiological nature of the trees, and no amount of time in university is going to help with that. So tree surveyors tend to come from tree surgeons. That tends to be the pipeline. That was certainly my journey. So he spent a bit of time training me up. I went to Myers Co and did the FDSC in Arb, where I was living in North Wales. And then for various family reasons, which we could spend hours on, I found myself in the far north of Scotland working for a company up here where I live now in Inverness in the Scottish Highlands. And I worked as a contracts manager looking after various large-scale tree clearance schemes for things like road road schemes and stuff like that. And I still had my own arboricultural consultancy. It was nothing fancy. It was just me. It was 40 or 50 grand a year. It was clients scattered all over the UK. And I used to go off on my motorbike around the UK, picking up the data for the tree surveys. And then I'd come back to Scotland and write the reports. Obviously, that went down really well with my now ex-wife, that I was disappearing off for 5 days at a time, collecting data all over the country. But my arsehole belief at the time was that that's what I needed to do to provide for my family. And ultimately, that marriage fell apart because of that. So I thought, Jesus, I need to do something different. And then I've always had an interest in aviation. My father had a background in aviation. I was always interested in model aircraft and all that sort of stuff. And I became aware in about 2011, 2012 of a company in China who built flight controllers, which meant that model aircraft could fly autonomously. And that's how they start. Everybody knows the name.
Wow,
It was
I didn't know that.
Single Chinese guy out there that developed these flight controllers. And about a year to 18 months after he developed the flight controllers, they launched a little white drone called the DJI Phantom, which is now, every time there's a news story, that's what you see, is one of these white drones, nearly brings down an airliner or something.
I owned one for a while, and we did some cool vids about 7 or 8 years ago. They're really good.
I've got one nailed to the wall. This is my office. The main office of the business is downstairs, and there's one nailed to the wall. Anyway, I digress. And I thought, do you know what? We could use this within the tree business. This would be fantastic. We can use these for, looking at London planes in London and this, that, and the other. This would be absolutely awesome. So I went off and did the training that you had to do at that time. And there's a book I've written, it's behind me, called Unmanned, which charts that journey because it is a very long journey. But I did all the training. And back in those days, you couldn't buy a drone off the shelf. The Phantom was out, but that wasn't really good for commercial work. You had to build your own, which was really complicated. And the things would only fly for 4 or 5 minutes. So I dropped about 15 grand into this drone, had a GoPro underneath it at the time, and then it got upgraded so that it would have a digital SLR. And we did all sorts of experiments looking at trees and forestry and this, that, and the other. And I was super excited about this. And this goes right the way back to what I said at the start about researching your market. I went to our existing customers and said, I've got this fantastic tool. You won't believe what we can do. And they basically said, yeah, piss off. Just didn't get it. And the phone started ringing for film and TV work, which, although I had a bit of an interest in TV and videography, I had no idea about the film world. And I went on a bit of a journey for 3 or 4 years as a film drone pilot. So I started a company called Rover, which stands for Remote Operated Aerial Vehicles. Stupid bloody name. If I'd known what I know now, I'd have chosen something different. But there we go. That's what it's called. So I set up Rover Group properly in 2014. But for about the first 4 or 5 years, we mostly just did TV work. So I'm the CEO of Rover Group now. I'm an author. I'm a podcast host. I'm a business coach at what I call the stability strategy. And I'm a film drone pilot. So I've done really cool stuff. I've worked on James Bond and all sorts of things. And it was really, really cool. But tying back to my failed marriage, what happens in the film world? There's no consistency of work. You could be away for 3 months on a film set and then come back again. And that's not great for someone with a young family. And that marriage broke down, and it meant, shit, I really need to do something different. And that's when I got into self-development, personal development, mindset, mastermind groups, and all that sort of stuff. And as a direct result, to link it to what we're doing today, of being involved in a mastermind, I looked at everything. I said, what am I at heart? I'm a tree surgeon. I like trees. I'm an arboricultural consultant. Surely there's a way of building some sort of system whereby we can generate leads for tree surgery, for tree surveys, and we can build a business. And we started doing that with full force probably around 2017, 2018. And now we're a nationwide survey and inspection company. So we help people get their planning back on track by providing tree surveys to support planning applications, tree safety surveys, and ecology surveys. So that's sort of where we are now.
Love it. And how many consultants have you got working for you at the moment then?
Good question. I'm actually at the point where I'm starting to lose track. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Good. I think we're around something like that between trees and ecology, which doesn't sound like a great deal. But the way we bring full-time employees into the company is we go looking for tree surgeons who've had enough and want to pack up their business. So come speak to me. And the other thing that we do is we bring on graduates as freelancers. So we've got probably about 20 freelancers that we use as well, and they get inducted into our system and they follow all our process and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, I've probably got somewhere about 30 to 38 people around the UK.
Love it, smashing it. So you just talked about working with tree surgeons. How does that work? Explain to me how it works and what service do you provide, and explain to me the nuts and bolts of that.
So I don't know how up to speed your listeners will be on the tree survey side of things, but as a tree surgeon, most tree surgeons have worked off of a consult tree safety survey.
Yeah.
And quite often they can be very technical. They can use language that some tree surgeons won't necessarily fully understand, and they're not easy to interpret and they're not easy to price from. So from a tree safety survey perspective, what we've always looked to do is build relationships with tree surgeons where they can add another revenue stream to their existing business. So what we will do is we'll basically white label the tree survey service. So you've got a customer, I don't know, they might have 6 mobile leisure parks in your area. They need annual tree safety surveys. We'll do those tree safety surveys and we'll either give kickback to the tree surgeon, we will, or give their customer a discount. It can be fiddled around, it's bespoke, or we can build a web portal, which basically means that that tree surgeon can offer tree survey services, but we fulfill it on their behalf. So there's still a degree of separation between the tree surgeon and the arboricultural consultant. And it just means that we can build a really good relationship together. And just to give you some example, we could do a £600 tree safety survey for, I don't know, an NHS site somewhere, and it might generate 15 grand's worth of tree surgery work.
Yeah.
Either instantly or over a number of years, because a lot of these places have no schedule in place whatsoever. And we do the same for BS 5837 2012 tree survey. So any planning application that goes in anywhere in the UK, if there are trees on or adjacent to the red line boundary of that planning application, then that person needs a tree survey so that the local planning authority can see how those trees may be retained or affected by the proposed development. We see a lot of tree surgeons that attempt to do those types of surveys themselves. They're not massively technical, but they attempt to do those surveys themselves. The local planning authority pushes back, says it's not up to standard or it's not good enough. Then the relationship between the tree surgeon and their long-standing client, because they might have agreed to do it through gritted teeth anyway to keep the relationship going, that relationship can then break down because they've not done a good enough job. So we help out in that situation. And then the ecology stuff just bolts onto that. It's just a natural bolt on. So
Yeah, absolutely love it. And that's kind of what I've done for a number of years now, but worked with a couple of local consultants, and it adds as you say, it adds an extra revenue stream. And then it also means that you're getting the ability to be able to create work for yourself and work packages. And we've always sold it to our clients in this way that we say we use an outside consultant because there's no conflict of interest there, because you know that you're going to get a completely independent advice on your trees. Because the negative side of having your own consultancy in-house is that, you know, technically you could be sending guys out there and saying we need to produce work,
yep.
and you might not be getting the full picture. So we love it by having, consultants, and certainly we're going to do some business with you coming up, Matt. So if anyone wants to speak to Matt about that, what we'll do at the end of this episode, or in this episode, we'll put all of Matt's details so you can get in touch and then use one of Matt's guys and be able to create some more revenue in your tree surgery business, and also not just the revenue for doing the survey, and also solving something for a client. Then you're getting the potential to quote on for that work moving forward, which, as you say, like we've doing some work on some NHS sites and they've been touched for years, and the amount of work they're producing is just insane, and they need to be done because it's health and safety, and they're getting their pants pulled down by people getting injured and all sorts of stuff on site. So yeah, really, really great service that you're doing there, Matt. And
yeah,
I love that.
I don't think you can underestimate what a useful revenue stream it can be for your business as well. And also, I think it's easy to. You mentioned conflict of interest there. That is a huge thing. Quite often, we've done tree safety surveys off the back of other people, sometimes tree surgeons who've done their own tree safety surveys, and the customer doesn't believe it. They do think that they're just pulling their pants down, because although we understand what fruiting bodies look like, what pockets of decay look like, what mechanical damage can look like from construction. It's not totally obvious to the customer. And one of our unique selling points is that our consultants do a video of not only the desktop reports so the customer understands it, but also on site, and we tie the drones into it as well. So it means then that whoever's going to site, whether it's your guys, whether the customer wants to watch it or what, they've got a video walkthrough and they understand why we're suggesting that this tree needs to be removed or crown lifted or reduced or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And like, just for clarity for everyone listening, I'm not saying that there's consultants or tree surgery companies out there making up their own money, but from a customer's point of view, if you go and do a survey for them and then you send them a quote after that for 30 grand's worth of tree work because there's got so much work doing, the first thing they're going to think is this genuine? Do you know what I mean? Because every customer wants to work out, like, can I believe that this is actually something that needs to happen? So it's not about whether there's tree surgeons or consultants out there doing something they shouldn't be. It's more coming from the angle of the client of going, okay, well, this has come from someone independent, and this is a tree surgery company that's going to quote do the work off the independent person. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, it's the human psychology element of all of this can't be underestimated, and quite often the people that are dealing with the tree safety survey side of things as well, they haven't necessarily got a background in that and they don't really understand. It may be that it's been delegated to them from somebody else in the team, and they want somebody that can help them out and guide them through it and also make them look good as well. So if they're then going to their boss and saying, look what I've got, here's a video explaining why we need this work, then that can be really, really valuable for just from a relationship building perspective.
Yeah, love it. So Matt, you mentioned when we were talking earlier about being part of masterminds and mentoring and things like that, and that you're a coach yourself. What sort of, tell me, like, you've created a lot of success in it over the years. What part has, like, being part of mastermind groups and having mentors played for you creating that success?
I think there are two really big ones. And I think the first one is being in a group of peers that understand what it's like being a business owner, how lonely it can be. I would suggest that most of your listeners, if they're sensible, don't speak to their partner about the challenges that are going on in the business, the fact they've got a 15 grand VAT bill at the end of the week and they're not sure how they're going to pay it, all of that kind of stuff. So I think being in a room, and I would encourage you to be in a room, not try and do it remotely as much as you possibly can do. Being in a room of your peers and being able to be open and honest about what's going on in your business is just immensely valuable. And the first mastermind that I was in, they used to travel from all over the country to get in the room. The room was locked out at 30, so there's never any more than 30 of us. And people would travel from all over the country. And lots of the guys would say, and it was a male-only space, and a lot of the guys would say, this is the only time in the month that really I get the opportunity to sort of bear all and just not be judged for it. So there's the room of peers side of things. And then the other big one is accountability as well. If you are going to stand up in front of everybody and say, right, I commit to doing X, Y, Z and getting them in place by our next meeting in a month's time, 2 months' time, whatever it is, then you get stuff done, don't you? If it's in the diary, it's going to happen. We all have things that we want to do, but we don't necessarily ever get round to them. And that's quite often because there's no accountability at the end of the day. So they're the two big ones, I think. And the first mastermind that I was in, I signed up to it probably within 6 weeks of my wife walking out on me. And I knew I had to do something. So that was the catalyst for me. They say, don't they, when the pain gets so great, you'll move spaces. And that's what I did. And it was the best thing I ever did. And I can 100% hand on heart say my business would not be where it is today had I not joined that mastermind. So yeah, huge. Because you go to college, you learn how to get up and down a tree safely. You might spend time as a groundsman watching the climbers before you get the opportunity to climb yourself, learning how to do the mechanics of it. But nobody tells you how to read a profit and loss sheet, how to build a direct response marketing funnel, what your allowable cost per lead is, what the actual cost per book job is, because you win a job for 1,500 quid, but actually you've spent 2 evenings driving around all over Surrey quoting So that job's actually worth half that if you value your time in any way, shape, or form. So it's all that sort of stuff, which is
Yeah.
game changing for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's kind of why I started the tree surgery mastermind. I think before my business failed, I didn't do any self-development or any mentoring, and I didn't have a clue well, I knew what my profit and loss was, but I didn't know what my balance sheet was, a cash flow forecaster, systems and processes and all that kind of stuff. Like, just did it on pure hard work and drive and determination. And then I got into the self-development world and started going to masterminds, and that's how we met, through a mastermind, right?
Yep.
And it's like one of the biggest things I got from it, and it's difficult to sell this because people go, but I don't want to pay to be part of a community. But like, the biggest thing is that peers thing, being part of a community, going somewhere and everyone chatting and going, yeah, I've got this problem. Someone going, have you thought about this? And have you thought about X? And actually, yeah, I understand you on that. I get that. And this is how we deal with it. And or just having someone to listen to. And then the other bit is, yeah, you're right, the accountability. And, that's one thing I kept scratching my head. Like, why is no one doing this in the tree surgery industry? Like, why is there nothing like this? And this is kind of where the tree surgery mastermind came from, is exactly that. Is going, like, let's get some tree surgeons in a room. And a lot of people said to me, you're not going to be able to do it. We've had up to about 45 people on the mastermind, but in the room we usually have about 15 or 20 people. And people said to me, you are literally not going to get tree surgeons sat in a room. And we've gone and done it. And I'm very proud of it because, we have a really open culture, like you've talked about, where people can sit and go, yeah, I've got this really shit thing going on. And then people just bounce ideas around. And you know what it's like. When your head, if you've got problems and you're not speaking to anyone, you can't speak to your missus, you go to the pub and your mates don't want to talk to you about it, the problems feel a lot worse in your head. And quite often when I'm coaching people, they're almost answering their challenges as they're talking about them. But because they're talking about them, they're suddenly seeing like the wood through the trees, to use that pun. But you're exactly right. And I'm a great believer in having those communities and those support groups.
Well, I think it's fantastic what you've done, and about 3 years ago, I actually thought about doing something similar because of my own journey. And my own journey in that space culminated in me. I'm not going to say it was a nervous breakdown, but it wasn't far off that. I was in a terrible relationship at the time, had 2 very young children. I outsourced my office, which was a desk and a computer and a second phone line, because we actually had to have proper physical phones back 25 years ago. God, it is that long ago. I put it in my parents' spare room. So I used to have to drive from Guildford, Warpleston, where I lived in Guildford, across to my parents in Ashvale, which was only 8 or 9 miles away, but it used to take 20 minutes to get there. So I'd have to go out, do the quoting, go over there, do all the paperwork, physically write out checks to pay bills and post them and all that sort of stuff. And this was going on for a good couple of years. I was driving home one night and I just snapped. So I just had enough. And I threw my mobile phone out the window of the car and that was it. And I pretty much turned my back on that business in the end. I just had enough of it. So I think what you're trying to do, if it stops people getting to that stage, because there's an industry, there's a peer group there that they can speak to, it's really valuable. And one of the barriers, I think, with tree surgeons is that, because I used to meet other tree surgeons who I knew reasonably well, and Surrey's very busy for tree surgeons, as you know, in Tesco's or in Honey Brothers or whatever. And they'd be like, you busy? And you'd be like, yeah, really busy, mate. Yeah, I've rushed off my feet. And it was all bollocks, And being in a room with guys where, they're going through the same thing, there's the potential to collaborate on jobs as well. Somebody's going to be where you want to be in 3 years, and they're going to help you come up because they know what it was like when they were there, and there's so much that you can do in those environments. It's really, really valuable.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Like, there's a lot of it's the ego and the bravado and what I now call the Instagram life, where everyone's showing their best life and all their shiny kit. But actually, we all know that underneath that is a very stressed out business owner trying to deal with all the bills, as you say, the VAT bill, now the corporation tax bill, and after yesterday's budget, a lot more hassle as well that's going to be coming our way. So no, yeah, you're exactly right, and again, hit the nail on the head. So what do you think is the biggest challenge facing our industry in the coming years?
We have 3 monthly strategy sessions, so we talk about this. My gut feeling is there's going to be some legislative challenges coming. I don't know what that is necessarily going to look like. For my own business, because we work in the planning space heavily, I think there's going to be a big shake-up in the planning space. There's a new British standard coming out for tree surveys to support planning applications. We've got biodiversity net gain, which is assessing trees in a different way. And it's important for your listeners to understand how that is going to affect them and their customers. So if you've got a customer coming to you that wants to clear their site ahead of putting a planning application in, although there's always been some stigma around, that is an absolute no now, because with biodiversity net gain, the site could be given a higher value at baseline than it had if the trees were still there, if the scrub was still there, and that could have huge financial implications for the developer or the landowner. So I think I like to try and remain optimistic, but there's a lot of challenges coming in that space, in the development space. I think if you're doing commercial work, there's going to be a lot of problems in that space coming up in the next couple of years or so, particularly when the new British Standard comes out and B&G gets fully integrated from that perspective. So
challenging times with that. So what do you think about, the regulation in the industry, especially for tree surgeons and the Arboriculture Association? Because obviously the Arbor Association have given it a crack to try and get regulation and get the government on board, but it doesn't seem to be like people always talk on Arb Talk and other places about if we could get some sort of corgi registration, which essentially is the Arbor Association, but it becomes something that the insurance companies and councils and everyone says you have to use an Arbor-approved contractor or whatever the corgi registered version of that would be for the government. Do you ever see anything like that actually being enforced or coming in?
I don't think so. I think I don't think there's enough money in the sector first for anybody politically to take it seriously enough. In the ecology space, we've got CIEM, which is the Chartered Institute of blah, 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 blah. And that causes more problems than anything else, I think. I have really mixed feelings about the Arb Association. I was just reaching across the desk there because I've just got a little certificate here through the post. This was obviously somebody's idea of what can we do to thank people for being, members for years, apparently. This one is. And this says 10 years of membership. Well, I'm no maths genius, but I think July 2010 to September 2024, I think that's 14 years when that dropped through. So make of that what you will. It doesn't give me a great deal of confidence. I've never been a huge advocate of the Arb Association, and I'm not convinced that they're necessarily the right people to push forwards that kind of proposal. I found and ran the Trade Association for Drones. So I've got quite a bit of experience around this, and it's very challenging. And we talked about having some kind of registration scheme, tiered registration scheme, and we had huge pushback from the members. And I think that's probably what the Arb Association would get as well, to be fair to them. I've always been a huge fan of the market being sort of consumer driven and educating the consumers. So I'm old enough to remember when Checker Trade started, and it started in the sort of Southampton area, and that was huge for my business. Do you remember the cards?
It was actually, I think it was more Chichester, but I could be wrong.
That's right. No, it was Chichester.
Yeah. And I was one of 2 tree surgeons on it, and we got so much work from it. And I gave up on Checker Trade in the end because it was just the point where I was turning up to quotes, and it was like, we're getting 10 quotes, and you're one of 10. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not even going to quote because I know that you'll just get out there for the cheapest. I'm not going to be the cheapest person. And I used to walk off site sometimes, and people would be like, what? Like, why not quoting? I was like, because it's just no point. You're getting 10 quotes. And it went, as you say, from being a really great source to a really poor source. But it was good while it was good.
If I was running a tree surgery company now, with what I know about human psychology and direct response marketing and all that kind of stuff, I would be looking at what the market's doing and going in completely the opposite direction, because I think that's the way to go. I don't think you should try and compete with your peers on a level playing field, because then it just comes down to a price argument, doesn't it? So I would be looking at carving out my own niche, whatever that looks like. Whether I called the business something different, I don't know, but I'd be looking to go in completely a different direction to everybody else, because you don't want. This is the problem with service-based industries, because we have it in our Arb Consultancy as well. It's like, well, why are you charging me 800 quid for this? And my local tree surgeon is going to charge me 150 quid because we know what we're doing and we're doing all of this. I just won't compete on price anymore.
And so why do you think that Arbor Association are missing the mark, really? Because it's not only you, like when now being part of this mastermind and being around the industry, like a lot of the industry have, a negative view on it. I've been an Arbor proof contractor for 10 plus years, and down where I am down south, all the contracts we go for, you have to be pretty much Arbor approved. But when talking to some of the masterminds, especially Midlands and North, you don't have to be Arbor approved. And a lot of people have started to look at it and gone, well, why bother? But what do you think the Arbor Association need to do or are not doing that they need to do more of?
That is a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how they're made up as an organisation anymore. I have at times in the past, when I was looking to integrate drones into tree surgery and forestry, I had meetings with them and looked at how we could do CPD courses and all this sort of stuff. And I guess what struck me more than anything else was that the vast majority of people in there were not running a contracting business anymore. So they didn't necessarily have a good understanding of what was going on. Whether that is still the case or not, I don't know. I don't know anything about their senior leadership team anymore.
Sure.
I just personally, I don't really put much value in trade associations these days. And again, when a customer is asking you to be ARB approved, why are they asking you to be ARB approved? Is it because they care about that process? No, it's not. It's because they can then use that to justify to the public, their customer, whatever it might be, that they've done some form of due diligence. So I think that's the major issue with that. My senior arboricultural consultant, Peter Hain, he ran a contracting business up until 5-6 years ago when he joined us, and he was ARB approved. And he said it was very valuable in terms of putting structure and process into the business, but in terms of generating work, it wasn't.
Well, I think
And
that's what a lot. Yeah,
it's
I
that
think
tree
that is.
surgeons think it's going to generate work for them when that's not the point of it. So,
Yeah, exactly that. And I think the things is people do everything on there. They pat test. They get all their fire extinguishers redone. Everyone's got their fully tickets. It costs a lot of money. Not the actual cost of being a member isn't and being a contractor isn't a huge amount. I think it's a 1,500 quid a year or something like that. So it's not a huge amount, but it's everything else that you've got to do. And then you put all that into context, and then people want a return on their investment, and it doesn't really. Like the phone doesn't start ringing when you become ARB approved, and I think that's probably where they get a bit of a bad rap. And actually, you've got to use it like to win contracts and a bit of a badge of honour and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully, we'll get John Parker, who's the CEO, on this show, and we can have a good chat with him about it in the future. But moving on, tell me what your views are on tree planting and how that's going in this country, because I know that's a huge part of the government are pushing out. We must plant this many trees, but tell me your views on whether we're hitting or missing the mark with that.
I don't know how well placed I am to comment on that. All I would say is that as part of our day-to-day operations, you ought to have Peter on here at some point. It'd be interesting to get his opinion because he's
definitely
right at the sharp end. What I feel about it is that this is BNG is becoming is turning into this, is that trees are planted for the sake of planting them, and there is no maintenance on the back end, and they're planted in the wrong places. So we quite often will go to new build schools, which are a mix of remnant tree population and new planting. And the new planting is trees planted in a matrix of grass with a couple of stakes, if you're lucky. And how many of those trees in 3 years' time are going to be ring barked with a dead top if they haven't been snapped off by the kids, the tree ties aren't loosened, etc., etc. So, tree planting, particularly in urban areas, is vital and it should be encouraged. It's a really important part of reducing our impact on the climate in the UK, but there has to be an aftercare regime. And I think we're going to see more and more habitat creation as part of biodiversity net gain that fails because the aftercare just isn't there and there isn't the budget for it. How many road schemes have you driven past where they've planted millions of new trees? I was speaking to a guy the other day that's working on HS2 and he's just taken delivery of 800,000 whips that they're putting in. And it's just going to become a litter trap and then be flailed at some point. So I
Yeah, well,
think,
it's like I remember it was a long time ago now, and this might have changed, but there was a certain contractor, which I won't name, in the London boroughs who they were paid to do maintenance, but they didn't do maintenance because it was cheaper that once the tree died, that they'd just replace the tree rather than do the maintenance. Basically, which is just, it's backwards. So with one of the things that we've talked about before, you've always talked about putting trees first, through your consultancy. So tell me more about that.
So that's our buzzword. And I actually stole that from
Yeah.
a customer and a colleague in our business mastermind who run a asbestos consultancy. And their buzzword was asbestos first, not last, because it never gets considered. And I thought, that's good. So we stole that, and he knows that I've stolen it, so that's fine. So yeah, our kind of thing is trees first, not last. That's always been our sort of outgoing message. And basically what we mean by that, specifically in relation to planning, is that trees should be considered very early in the design stage. So without getting massively technical, and I can just see your listenership dropping off as I start down this rabbit hole. What often happens, the way people come to us in marketing terms, they have what we call a bleeding neck. So they've got a problem that needs sorted instantly, or they're going to die. And that situation is basically they have submitted their planning application and it's been rejected, or it's not been validated because either they haven't got a tree survey, or the tree survey they've provided is inadequate. What happens is an architect goes round to Mrs. Miggins' house in Ascot and says, we can build this beautiful annex. You've never seen anything like it, and you can have an orangery, and we'll do this and that and the other. And in the corner of the garden is a huge, 150-year-old copper beech that's got 15-meter root protection area all the way around it, and they need to dig strip foundations within the tree's root protection area. They come to us and say, we need a tree survey to support our planning application. And we're like, not a problem. We'll come around and do that. And we do it, and we draw all the plans. And then we look at it and we go, well, this is unbuildable. There's no way that you can do this, and you're not going to be allowed to do this. So then we're the bad guys. So the whole trees first, not last thing is that if you're thinking of doing any development whatsoever, the first things that you should be looking at are what are the constraints on sites. Have a topographical survey done first, and then have your tree surveys and your ecology surveys done, and then see what you've got, rather than do them further down the line, because it just creates heartache, more cost, and it's just a massive pain in the arse for everybody. So
I love that, and I love that saying, put trees first, because we talk about tree planting in one instant, but actually tree planting also comes hand in hand with not felling every tree in sight, right? It's got to be, we got to conserve what our tree stock is in the different areas. So yeah, I love that slogan. So we're sort of coming towards the end, and I've really enjoyed this podcast episode, Matt. It's been really, really valuable for our listeners. What further point would you like to share before we go?
I think, given your listenership, I just think don't rule out building relationship with your local arboricultural consultant or national arboricultural consultant, whatever that may be. The thinking behind that being that there's an untapped revenue stream there. Is it something that's going to immediately generate work? No, not necessarily. But building relationships are what it's all about. We've got tree surgeons and facility management companies and landscape companies that we've been working with for 10, 15 years now. And, we have a really, really good relationship with them. We generate them a lot of work, and then we get a lot of work out of them. So try and build relationships. Don't rule out tree arboricultural consultants as all being tweed-wearing twats, because then, there's a lot of us out there that are perfectly normal and are, I must say, pragmatic as well. So I think that point gets missed a lot. Myself and my team are all ex-tree surgeons. We know what it's like in the trenches. We can help our customers out because we can give them estimates on time for doing jobs. We'll pick up on things like, well, this job, it might only be 3 men for a day, but actually you can't get a chipper anywhere near it. All those sorts of technical things, we can pick up on that. So yeah, look at building relationships with an arboricultural consultancy, because it's going to generate work for both of you. So I think that's probably the biggest.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And I love the fact that you employ lots of tree surgeons, because then there's already, an easy relationship there where you can pick the phone up and you can speak the same language essentially, and just, have a good conversation and understand each other. So where's the best place? And we'll put the links into the bio, but where's the best place to follow you for following your story and everything you do?
If you go for me personally, the best place, if you look for Matt Harmsworth, MATT Harmsworth on Instagram, you'll find me on Instagram. I'm pretty responsive to direct messages on there. Happy for anybody to contact me. And my personal website is mattharmsworth, all one word, .net. And there's links to contact me and my diary and all that sort of stuff on there. If you're a tree surgeon that's interested in building relationships around tree surveying and stuff like that, I can then signpost you to the right person in my team. What I wouldn't want you to do is send you to our main business website and then the value of this conversation gets lost. So come through me and I'll make sure you're pushed in the right direction.
Amazing. And you also run a podcast?
I do, yeah. The Ask the Arb podcast, which I haven't done any episodes since I think July time. So there's a lot going on. So as we're recording this, my fiance is in labour. So
thank you for being here.
It was down to the wall. So yeah, hopefully there'll be a little girl when I get home. Well, not when I get home. I'll be divorced again otherwise. But yeah, I've forgotten where I was.
You can just turn up for the the trophy moment, basically. The whole holding the baby up to the window,
putting sawdust on their face. So that's me, and that's what I'm all about. So yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Matt. And we'll let you get on now so you can go and see your wife, and all the best for the future. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon and see you at the next mastermind.
Awesome. Thanks, Henry. I will catch you later.
Cheers, Matt.